All right. So thank you once again to everybody for joining in. So today we have a little surprise. We have Mr. Sushanto Mitra, who will be on the panel today. But along with him, we have our director, Professor Dhruvnath. I'm sure most of you already know about him. You've read our book, but he's going to be chipping in today as well. So over to you, Sushanto.
Yeah. So thanks, Gitansh. So today is, they say that, uh, you know, we have this rule at Lead Angels, try to make an adversity into a opportunity. Today I had, a little bit of a medical issue at home. So I requested our Professor Dhruvnath to be here. So we are very lucky to have him here. And thank you, Dhruv, for coming along. Of course,
Welcome.
there is the other side to it that because Dhruv is there, he's going to outshine me completely. So,
No, I mean, what Sushanto means, no. Let's understand what he means by outshine. It means this.
so yeah. So it'll be great. And this is more about, sharing each other's experience in angel investing, and for those who are getting introduced to angel investing for the first time, to give them a view. I'm very happy to take questions post the time also. We'll try to finish off by 1 o'clock. Uh, and yeah, so Gitansh, if I can request you to share the screen.
Yes, I'll just do that. 1 second.
And I apologize to those who would have gone through this presentation once, but I'll promise I'll do it very, very quickly, and then we'll take questions, a few questions, two questions on the presentation, and then move on to the presentation about angel investing. And then Dhruv has kindly agreed to talk about the persistent model, which is, something which he and to some extent I worked on. We'll talk about that. We are all good
Is,
to.
is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
So thank you once again for coming on a Saturday, now afternoon, which is better spent in having beer than listening to two old people. But thank you very much for being here. So a little bit about angel investing for those people who are here for the first time, but for the others, we'll move on to, and primarily to here talk about how Lead Angels has moved beyond angel investing into other things, and how that actually helps our angel network. So we have, we are very lucky to have very, very successful professionals, CXOs and others in our bids. And that is what really guides the direction, starting with people like Dhruv, who have studied startups, worked with startups, and then done startups, and then help us to decide which companies to invest in, and how to support them. But the little background is, I was running the incubator at Sign, and with a professor and a student started Lead Angels. And what we have built from the start was to see, are we solving all the problems of a startup? And having worked in an incubator for some time, we feel that we understand some of the problems of startups. And in doing so, help us. We today, Lead Angels also invest in companies as well as our investors. So it's like a win-win-win for everybody. Please go ahead. So that's I was talking about the full stack. So we've gone much beyond the angel network. So angel network is what we started with, but we soon enough we realized that early stage companies need management and professional support. And my colleague Suman, who's also a CFO, supports that activity, both from a startup perspective as well as from an investor, overseeing the legal and financial due diligence and other things that when we do um, before we invest in a company. Advisory services is with my colleague Lakshmi. She's actually at an event right now. But here we help companies to raise capital after they've raised their first round of angel investing. And for a startup, the first 12, 18 months are very critical, and that's where we come in and help them to raise the next round. And then when it goes to, pre-series A and series A, they can, they're better equipped to handle that either on their own or with some other advisors. Behind all this is the legal structure of investing through a SEBI registered fund. What that helps is that it makes it less cumbersome on the paperwork. I think today increasingly startups only want a single entry on their cap table. They don't want to have too many shareholders on their cap table, and that's what Lead Angel Fund helps us. What it also ensures is that every time our investors invest, we also invest. So our interests are completely aligned for the success of that investment. Next, please. And if somebody asks me, what do we really do every day from morning till evening, is evaluating companies. And of course, Dhruv will talk about his persistent model, but we are also very persistent in pursuing this evaluation because we think that is our production. So we see a lot, 200 plus startups every month, and then they are reviewed by the team, and then they come to our IC, and finally we showcase them to our members, and then they are further interested. Then one of them takes up the role of doing one more deep dive before we decide whether to invest in the company or not. Next, please. This is the process that I've talked about, and I'm glad to say that even if our team has cleared the company, the investment committee has cleared, our members, deal lead is willing to invest, there are still situations that we will drop a company if there is something, the due diligence that we find is not right. And actually that just happened last evening. Suman and my other colleague Kruti, we were online and we decided to drop a company just because there was something not right about their due diligence. So we may have spent 3 months doing this whole process, and some of our members do talk about the fact that it's a long process, but I think that is really what differentiates us from many of the crowdfunding sites, because we don't see ourselves as a crowdfunding site. We see ourselves as a angel network and a fund, and that's really the difference. We can drop the deal at any point in time. Yes, Ajinkya, I will take this up immediately after I finish this thing. So many of our members bring transactions to the platform. Yesterday, if you were there, we had a company called Rosanna which presented. One of our members, Shubhendu, brought that transaction, so he will lead that syndication. So he becomes the lead of the syndicate lead. Okay. Go on, please. Let's go on. I promised Dhruv finished off. So yeah, so I think all this process, this is the result of that evaluation, is that we have a high survival rate. A lot of companies are able to raise additional funding. I would say almost 50 to 60% of our companies raise their next round, if not more. And all the pieces then come together in helping the company raise the next round or to do an M&A. So M&A is very critical right now, as the India sort of startup market matures, and you're seeing a lot of M&A. Today I have a meeting after this with one of our portfolio companies and one of our advisory client companies for a possible M&A. Next, please. Yeah, so this is sort of gives you a glance of, what do we do, and it only shows the hard work of the team that many of these parameters have changed very dramatically over the last 2 years, I would say. And we'll talk about some of our portfolio companies in the next slide. So these are sort of returns that we have got, all the company valuations. Some of you who are present here may already have invested in that company. I would just like to talk about the one company here, which is Chef Cart. What I like about it is that we were able to get exit opportunity within 9 months of our investing. But of course, to add that this is a very lucky case. One of the key things, this was a company which was a very, very early stage company, but it was very disruptive. Just to let you know, this is a company which sort of allows you to subscribe to home cooks who come over your home either for a day or for a week or for a month. And that really solved the problem of a lot of young professionals working in the major metros. They're already in Gurgaon and in Noida, and soon will be. And the interesting thing is, in a couple of months after which they started, Urban Company also started the same business. So it gives us even more confidence that we made the right investment. Many of these deals have been brought by our members, and they participate and become a partner in evaluating and then thereafter supporting the company. Next, please. So this is some of a larger group of companies. Interesting to see most of them, whether it's Indus Valley or Bars, Godesi. I think Dhruv wants to speak about Godesi. Just spoke about Godesi in a seminar yesterday. But all of them have raised money at a higher valuation. Some have got merged. So I think a reasonably happy portfolio. Please go ahead. Just to give you a breakout of what has happened, I think it's a little dated that all presentations are, but Market Pulse is just about to raise another round. So has InStory and so on. We work with a lot of VCs, and that enables us to give inputs to our startups from there. And of course, our advisory team helps these M&As and exits to happen, which is also very critical for for our investors. So Chef Cart, as you can see here, talks about how Bloom and Pravega give partial exit to some of our investors. Next, please. So we have the fund, which is, as I told you about, this is what is the SEBI registered structure. It aligns our interest and that of our members because of the way that we also invest alongside our members. Next, please. This is how the fund works. We, and some of you who are members already know, we have a team which selects companies, and the investment happens through a SEBI recognized fund, that's called Lead Angels Fund, and Lead Pass, which is the parent company, is sponsor to that fund, and we have a SEBI defined entity called Credential, which does the trusteeship services on behalf of the investors. So in a way, the investment manager and the transactions are separated by SEBI, ensuring that interests of investors are met. Next, please. We'll share that with you, Chandni. Lead advisory, as I said, helps largely our portfolio companies to raise their next round. And what is also very interesting is, along with advisory services, we have initiated a portfolio support service also. Some of our members are involved in providing portfolio support to our investing companies. And the idea of this is that we don't have to go, the startup doesn't have to go elsewhere. We, of course, also have very smart and beautiful team, largely led by women. Kruti heads our investment team. Navina and Drishti support her. And of course, we have Dhruv on our board, and Suman is our CFO and head of our professional services. So that brings to the end of my part of the presentation. Happy to answer any questions. And Dhruv, if I have missed out something, you can add.
Yeah.
Any questions for us which we have not answered? Right. So the short answer to your question is we are a sector agnostic fund, and we primarily invest in those businesses which can scale and which require smaller, relatively smaller amounts of capital, because angel investors cannot invest large amounts of capital. So what is capital efficient and scalable businesses with a large amount. As far as what is the ticket size, we invest typically 1 to 1.5 crores. Or did I miss out something in the question?
Yeah, maybe I'll just add something, Sushanto. There's a question which is being repeated, which is about the deal leads, deal syndication leads, right? So maybe I'll just explain.
Right.
One of the things that Sushanto has spoken
Yeah.
about is, see, angel investing is actually a risky process because you're investing at a very early stage, at which time the business is only semi-proven, not fully proven. It may pivot many times, it may die, or it may do brilliantly, right? So it's a risky process. Therefore, the process that you use to evaluate the startup and the amount of shortlisting you do and the multiple stages you take it through become extremely important. Fortunately, the one thing that has happened at Lead Angels, and I think we've learned this over the years, over the last, 8-10 years, is we've been refining this process. And one of the steps in this, so I'll just explain the process to you. When a startup wants funding, they will typically approach us. They can approach any one of us, or you can send Lead Angels an email or go to our website and apply. Anything is possible. After that, it is evaluated by the people within Lead Angels, right? Which is, we have a 15-strong team. This is not the members. These are the permanent employees of Lead Angels, right? So we have analysts and they will evaluate the startup and figure out whether it makes sense to shortlist it further or not. After that, they put it up to the investment committee, which is about 4 or 5 people, including Sushanto, including my colleague Soman, including me. And then we decide further whether to drop it or take it forward. So it's been 3 steps so far. Subsequently, once the investment committee approves it, it goes up to a presentation to the members, right? And like Sushanto mentioned, we've got about 250, 300 odd members, and all of them are welcome to attend. So the pitch is made to all the members, and then the members figure out whether they are interested or not. It's not a final decision. It's not a confirmation. It's not a commitment. It's only a level of interest. So the companies where members are interested, those then we look for, we look at the members who are interested, and within them we appoint either 1 or 2 deal leads, because now we need to do a very thorough, very detailed business evaluation, and these are the deal leads. So either 1 or 2. So they work along with the Lead Angels team, and typically it takes about a month. Very, very detailed, rigorous business analysis of the the business model, the past history, the future projections. We talk to customers, we look at the product, we understand what's happening, we look at competition and so on. All that is done jointly between the deal lead, who's a member, and the LI team. At the end of this, the deal lead decides whether or not he wants to invest. And if he does, he makes a commitment. Because you can't say it's a great company, but I'm not investing. That doesn't make sense. So the deal lead decides whether or not we go ahead, obviously supported by the LA team. Having done that, then there is a detailed series of Zoom calls or Google Meet calls or whatever, where members are invited to look at what the deal lead has said, what the LA team has said, and they ask questions, and they also have the founder on these calls. So at the end of all this, then we ask the we ask the members, okay, which of you wants to invest and how much? So we take a commitment, but no money right now. Having done this, then see, so far it's only a business analysis. Now the accounting and legal and the company laws, all that due diligence starts happening. And that typically takes another month, maybe month and a half. At any stage during this entire process, at any stage, we can drop the deal in case something is going wrong and is not correctable, right? At the end of this due diligence, then we have the shareholder agreement, and those people who gave a commitment earlier on are asked to put in the money. So this entire process has lots and lots and lots of checks by multiple people. It's the investment committee, it's the LA team, it is the deal lead, it is the other members, and it is, of course, the people who are doing the due diligence. So multiple people go through checks, and at the end, if we find it is worthwhile, we ask for money. So that's the process, and that's the role of the deal lead. I hope that clarifies the question you guys raised.
Thanks, Dhruv. You outshine me in many ways. Thank you very much.
What is the minimum amount? Normally, it is 5 lakhs. Is that correct? Is that still valid? Yeah, it's normally 5 lakhs.
We have a scheme by which the minimum can be 2.5 lakhs. Please get in touch with our team of Gitanj and Sakshi, and they will give you more details.
Okay, great. So, yeah, sorry. Any more questions? Otherwise, I'll talk about the process of business evaluation. I will not talk about due diligence, only business evaluation, because that itself is a big chunk. So, no question? Otherwise, I'll start.
Any more questions? We are always available on email as well for any of your questions. Over to you, Dhruv.
Thanks, Sushanto. So let me just share a screen of mine. So I must just 1 minute. Something seems to have gone wrong. Yeah. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I must tell you, evaluating companies is a complex job, especially because it's so risky. And we have been learning over the years. And as we have been learning, we have been trying to fine tune our process for business evaluation of a company, right? And as of today, we are using a framework that we call persistent. Incidentally, these 2 books you see on the right hand side, they are books which have come out of the Lead Angels table. So we guys have written them, and they talk about the persistent framework. What I will do today is I will tell you how we use the persistent framework to evaluate companies and what are the things we look at. Because like I keep saying, the process, the rigor is extremely vital. Otherwise, your hard-earned money just goes up like this. So I'll take up one of our portfolio companies. It's called Uno Finance. And I think we invested in it about 4 years back. Sushanto, yeah, about 4 years back. Okay, so let me first give you a little background about the company. The problem is that you have loans, and I'm taking you back 4 years in time, at the time that we invested. You have loans available for everything, business loans, personal loans, you have loans for TVs, for homes, cars, etc., but not for hospitalization. And the big reason why loans are not available for hospitalization, I think it's a very obvious reason, is it's a high risk. Because you go into hospital, you may not come back, or if you do come back, maybe you're incapacitated for, let's say, 6-7 months, and therefore you're not earning, so you can't pay back, right? So that's a fundamental problem. However, there are also cases of very low risk hospitalization where there is no risk to life and there is no risk to your earning capacity. Very simple example. My son had at some stage bent his knee. So the ligaments were torn. All he needed was some kind of knee surgery. He was on crutches for a few days and that's it. No problem with earning capacity, no problem, no risk to life, etc. So what Uno Finance has said is, okay, we will look at this low risk hospitalization and therefore we will give loans for these. So that's their basic premise. Now, the interesting thing is that they actually charge zero interest. It is zero interest EMIs. And the very simple reason for that. So normally I spin a long story, but today we don't have that kind of time. The reason for this is, they realized that many hospitals, particularly the slightly more expensive ones, had spare capacity. Okay, and many patients could not afford them, and therefore this capacity remained spare. So Uno Finance says, okay, we will provide these guys to whom, these guys will have to pay through EMI. And because they are paying through EMI, you suddenly have a new class of patients who can afford your hospital. And the hospital says, wonderful, they're going to fill up our capacity. Therefore, we will give you, Uno Finance, a commission on each person who joins us through you, right? So their revenue model is basically based on commission and not on interest, right? So that's the way they operate. And they have partnered with some NBFCs to be able to source the funds. Now, they tied up with these hospitals, and typically they would have a kiosk in each hospital where, the patient is walking out and the patient is shattered because the doctor has told him, you need this kind of surgery, it will cost you maybe 5 lakhs. He doesn't know what to do because he can't afford it. And suddenly, as he walks out or she walks out, he sees a kiosk which says zero interest loans. And suddenly he lands up there and says, my God, I mean, my life is saved. So it was a booming business, right? And this is how Uno Finance started. Now, having explained this, let me take you through our framework, and I call that the persistent framework, which, by the way, is talked about in these two books. So, persistent is an acronym which starts with where each letter stands for something. And I'll take you through each of these one by one because this is what Lead Angel uses to evaluate the startup. And the reason why I'm explaining this in such detail is that, unfortunately, in many cases, this level of detailed evaluation is not done by angel networks in many cases. I don't want to name anybody, but therefore the risk that you're taking is much higher because you haven't actually evaluated everything that you need to. So let me explain the persistent framework. First of all, P stands for problem, which means you need to be solving a problem for somebody. Otherwise, obviously, you don't have a business. And these guys were clearly solving a problem. A, for the hospital, they were filling up their capacity. And B, for the patient, because the patient who could not afford to go to a particular class of hospital suddenly could afford it because of the EMI. Right? So they were clearly solving a problem. Secondly, not only should you solve a problem, you should also have an earnings model, that is the E in persistent. Because if you don't have any earnings model, you're not making money, then obviously you're not running a business, you're running a charity, right? And clearly these guys were earning the commission that they got from these hospitals. Okay. Next, size of the market. Huge, right? The market for loans is huge. And obviously the size of the market needs to be large. Otherwise your startup starts stagnating. So one of the key things we look at Lead Angels is what size of market are these guys operating in? Otherwise, you will stagnate. And if you stagnate, you as angel investors, if the startup stagnates, you as angel investors will not get an exit because you will never get the next investor coming in. It's a stagnating business, right? So size of the market for loans obviously is huge, but sometimes the market is crowded. So the market for loans in general is phenomenally crowded. I mean, all of you get calls every day from people who offer loans at various interests. But if you find a market that is crowded, we look for a startup which has identified a niche or a subset of that crowded market, which itself is large enough but non-crowded. So what these guys had done is they were not giving loans for everything. That's too crowded. They were giving loans for hospitalization, which itself is large, but it's a non-crowded space. In fact, at the time they started, there were only about 3 or 4 small companies which were doing this. And Bajaj Finance had just about started, but this was not their focus area. So that's the N in persistent, identify a niche, and that's what we look for. The next very, very important issue that we look at, scalability. And I must tell you that at Lead Angels, one big reason why startups do not get past one of these stages is scalability. Typically, it doesn't get past either the initial stage or the IC stage, the investment committee stage. Just to give you a couple of quick examples as to what scalability does and what it means. See, scalability is not only being able to grow, scalability is being able to grow at a rapid pace. Very simple reason. See, you guys are all potential investors, right? All of you. And many of you would be in the stock market. Now, if you want a return of, let's say, 15 to 20%, why would you look beyond the stock market? You invest in Reliance, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, maybe Hindustan Lever, and you got your 15%. So 15% growth year on year is peanuts. You are investing in a risky asset class, which is startups. Therefore, the return you would expect is typically much higher. And for this higher return to come through, you need to be able to scale up very, very, very rapidly, right? At least in the early stages, maybe 200% a year, maybe 300% a year, not 15, not 20, not 25. It doesn't make sense for startups. Definitely does not make sense for investing in startups. Okay, so that's the concept of scalability. And if you don't scale fast, if your startup doesn't scale fast, boss, you know what Modi ji says, मेरे 135 crore देशवासी. Of course, now it's become 140 crore. No founder should ever be under the impression, and no investor should ever be under the impression that this guy is unique. There are lots of people doing the same thing. So if your startup is not scalable, somebody else will scale faster, eat into your market share and kill you. Okay, so both for the founder and for the investor, very, very important to ensure scalability. I just want to take 2 minutes or maybe 3 minutes on what contributes to scalability. You know, if you have a lot of manpower requirement and your revenue is proportional to, or your manpower required is proportional to the revenue, tough to scale. If you require a lot of infrastructure, a lot of capacity building, which requires money and land and buildings, tough to scale. On the other hand, if you're a technology-based company where it is not heavily dependent on either manpower or infrastructure, scalability is high, right? So if you look at Uno Finance, it's a fairly scalable business because everything is done online except for the kiosks, which they had in the hospital reception. And now, by the way, they have gone beyond kiosks. Now you can apply for a loan from your home over the internet, right? So no dependence on manpower, no dependence on heavy infrastructure, very highly scalable. Okay, so these are the first 5. Every business has risks, and one of the key things we try to look at is what is the risk? Because obviously startups are very risky. And one of the key risks potentially is the risk of competition getting in, which is why you need an entry barrier. I would say, you know, if you look at the last 8 years between Sushanto and me and Suman and Kruti and Sakshi and all our team members, the one single reason why we have knocked out people and not even let them come to Pitchput to our members is it's a Me Too business. It's a business which doesn't have an entry barrier. It's very easy for a competitor to get in. Maybe you already have competitors because then you're fighting for survival, right? So you need to have something which is an entry barrier, which prevents your competitor from catching you. Okay. And obviously, if you have something which is highly innovative, maybe a patent, that's a great entry barrier, right? Because legally, the other guy is not allowed to copy you. Now, if you look at Uno Finance and you look at the entry barrier here, sorry, just give me a minute. For partner hospitals, it was a good entry barrier because, you know, there's no space for kiosks. You can have 3, you can have 4, you can't have 30, right? So 3 or 4 people, competitors can get in, but not the other. But for other hospitals who are not partners yet, actually, it was a low entry barrier. Anybody can get into it. It's a loan business. You tie up with NBFCs, you offer loans at 0 EMI. No problem, you compete. So what did these guys do? And one big reason why we invested was this next step, which I must explain to you. So they said, how do we increase our entry barrier? So, you know, what they started doing was they looked at the next phase and they had already planned out the next phase when we invested. They said, why not expand the market? So far, we are only looking at 0 risk hospitalization. What if we take riskier kinds of hospitalization? Not those where, you know, the risk is 100% or 90%, not open heart surgery, no. But where the risk is, you know, 20%, 15%, 25%, those maybe we can do. And what we'll do now is we need to be able to estimate the risk in each case. And once we know the risk, we will not give the person a 0 interest EMI, we'll charge him some interest. depending on the level of risk, right? So that's the direction they took. The key, therefore, was how did they estimate the risk? What they did was they said, okay, first of all, they had a team of doctors. They did a phenomenal amount of research based on medical journals. And that told them, look, for this kind of disease, for this kind of procedure, for a patient with this background, diabetes and high blood pressure and obesity, this is the level of risk. So they got all that data, and the data was plugged into their database. Secondly, they also did local analytics based on Indian data. So, they got a lot of data from their partner hospitals, and therefore they were able to say, for this hospital, for this doctor with this kind of patient history, this is the kind of risk you have, and therefore we will charge so much interest. Now, just notice one thing. They had far better forecasting of risk than when they started because of all this data that they gathered. And please look at the entry barrier here. As they gather more and more data and do more and more research, the accuracy of forecasting this risk becomes higher and higher. And therefore, the competitor has to capture the same kind of data to be able to compete, right? So building up data over time and using that as an entry barrier is a phenomenal method. And they actually created a category of their own, risky loans. So that is 8 things. And the last two, entry barrier, the last two, one is the team, and the team starts with the founders. Wonderful team of founders. One guy had a background in management as well as healthcare. He'd actually managed a healthcare fund. And the other guy had a strong background in operations. So a good synergistic kind of team. And finally, what's the final proof? And that's something we look for as lead angels. What's the traction you achieved so far? It's very easy to create an Excel and say, look, I'm going to achieve 6 crores in the next year. Boss, what have you done so far? Okay. Revenues, customers, are they growing month on month? Are they growing quarter on quarter? That is the ultimate proof of the fact that your business is working out. So if you look at Uno Finance today we had made an investment about 4 years back, I told you. Today, they have partnered with about 1,000 hospitals across 7 major cities. Phase 2 is going strong, which is, what I told you, the higher risk hospitalization. They have moved away from just kiosks into web-based and therefore completely scalable. And now they are raising another round, I think the third round since we invested, at a much higher valuation. I can't tell you what that valuation is because that's not yet raised, but much higher valuation. So this was just to explain to you one example of the level of detail that you need to go through, and typically that we do go through before evaluating a startup and finally putting it up to our members and saying, boss, it seems to have passed our first round. So with that, I think I'll stop. And if you have questions for either me or Sushanto or anybody in the team, most welcome. Most welcome.
Yes, please.
I think we can take it from the top. We have one question by Mr. Abhijit Pudlia. What is your investment thesis and what kind of returns can investors expect over cycles and long term? What is our outlook on the valuation of startups given the global uncertainty and correction in public markets?
As I told you, we are a sector agnostic fund and network. So we invest across sectors. And as Dhruv very rightly said, we invest in companies which fall in the persistent model. But some of the key things is, is it a scalable business? Is the capital requirement low? Coming to returns, in our case, each investor contributes from precise companies he or she wishes to invest into. So in a way, each one's portfolio will be different. And hence, different investors will have different returns on their investment. But at a very broad level, I think we have been able to achieve on the overall portfolio more than 4x return, and the IRR comes to about 33%. That is the average IRR of investment. And that is what we are looking for in a company.
Okay, we have a question. Deal syndicate leaders, can you explain on this? I think we've covered this bit,
Yeah, I think
but there's a follow-on question.
That question.
do we have to come through them to you?
No. You can approach us through any mechanism. Email, our website, any one of us at Lead Angels, me, Sushanto, Sakshi, Gitanj, any one of us.
Then there's what is the minimum amount investor has to commit. I think that is also something we've covered. Then from Mr. Sameer Sayed, for fulfilling SEBI regulations, do I have to invest 25 lakhs in the same startup over a period of 5 years? Talking about the AIF.
Yeah. So we have, as per SEBI requirements, one has to invest 25 lakhs over a 5-year period in any of the startups that are presented at the Lead Angels portfolio. In a month, typically provide an opportunity for 2 to 3 startups to invest into. So over a period of 5 years, you will have more than 75 companies to invest in. And of course, you can invest more than 5 lakhs also in a company. For individuals, in a way, there are no real limitations. So you can invest 25 lakhs in a single company as well. I hope that answers.
Can I just add something to this, that there is a possibility of investing lesser than 5 lakhs as well? For that, you can reach out to us and we'll be most happy to help you with that. Okay, so next question by Mrs. Sai Narasimham. Are there any specific dates set for initial pitch briefings by founders?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Of course, Sai, we have a call tomorrow, but I didn't get that question.
All right. So I think we can, would you like to unmute yourself and ask this question again, or shall we take it up later?
Sorry.
Yeah, what I wanted to know is, do you have any, when you have founders coming for initial meetings, pitch decks and all that. So do you have, as it comes, you take it, or you have any monthly 2 times or specific days, or like Saturday or something?
Yeah, so we have 2. So typically our angel meetings happen on a Saturday afternoon, roughly once a month. So that's a monthly. And if there are companies which have already got invested through a VC, or there is a certain, or the company, the syndicate or the deal lead wants to present his views on the company, that is done at 8 p.m. on weekdays. Because we have members in the Middle East and in the US and Europe, we found that this time sort of suits everybody, and given the traffic on India roads, that's also the time that most of us are able to reach back home. So that's the sort of time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. Sorry. Somebody, Mr. Venkateshwaran, has asked me directly a question, but I think it will be of interest to everybody. So maybe I'll take that up. So I'll just read this. When you ask investors for commitment, can we assume that the Lead Angels team is recommending the company for investment? Okay. Now, I want to clarify one thing, and I think all of my colleagues will agree. Our objective here is not to sell the investment to you. We are advisors, right? But we believe we don't want to waste your time, and we want to put up companies that have a certain level of likelihood of success, right? And therefore, we do this evaluation. But in addition to LA, it is the deal lead, and ultimately it is, since we have so many members and many of them are involved in giving their feedback on the company, there is a lot of common wisdom because of this large group of experienced people that comes in, right? So I would say we do our evaluation, we put it up to you, but we are advisors. I don't think we are, and I don't think we are definitely not trying to sell the company to you. We are trying to say, look, this seems to be, from our point of view, a company that has satisfied our basic requirements. Now it is up to the members to decide.
Yeah.
That's the way.
Yeah.
Sushanto, you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So we will, our executive team will give you what is the pros of the company and what is the cons of the company. We are telling you that these are the risk factors and these are the things that could go wrong.
Correct.
And these are things which look good about the company. And we would want you to take the final decision.
Correct.
Whether you wish to invest or not. But I just also want to add that irrespective of whether you want to invest or not, if the deal gets sufficient traction from lead angels as an entity will always invest in the company, is also investing in the company. So you have that added benefit that lead angels is also an investor. I hope that answers the question. Any other questions, Gitansh? I know we are.
Yes, we'll quickly take you through a couple of them. One question from Mr. Rajat Diwan. There are a number of angel networks out there. Most of them talk about the selection process, which makes them different from others. How does LA position itself among these players?
So I think, without trying to be very boastful, but what I'd rather say what we are not. Right? We are not. So there are some very good angel networks, and we work closely with them, such as the Indian Angel Network or Mumbai Angels and other Chennai Angels, Hyderabad Angels. In fact, I was employee number 1 of Hyderabad Angels. and now there are a lot of companies which are, I would use the slightly strong word here, masquerading as angel networks. But in essence, what they are doing is that they are helping the company with the pitch, helping the company to make the business plan, put it them on the site, charge money for all these things, and then make pesky calls to their investors and push that company, sell that company to you, and of course charge money from the company for all the services. So in essence, these are crowdfunding sites. And remember, these only a bag of snakes comes free, as they call. So these so-called angel networks are free. They don't charge any membership. We have 15 people evaluating companies. There is a whole process. It's a 3-month long process of evaluating company. We are able to do this because they're charging the company all the money and trying to push this company to their investors. So this is what we are different on. We are very happy to work with some of the reputed angel networks, and likewise for them, and vice versa for them, because they know that we follow a certain process, and we are transparent about how we select and present companies to our members, and that's model is also very similar. Rajat, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, sure. In fact, I have sent a couple of more questions to Gitansh.
I think
Gitansh, if you could help me out there.
If people have time, we can extend it. I'm available. Sushanto, I know you may have to leave, but we can handle more questions, not a problem.
Right. So I'll move on to the next one. Can you give some examples of startups funded through LA, which number 1 started well but went down later, and the reasons for it? And number 2, who started badly but managed to recover well later, and the reasons for it? Okay, maybe one of each we can discuss.
Yeah. Sushanto, you want to do that, or maybe I'll take.
You can add your experience of investing in our taxi, perhaps. As
yeah. So yes, I think we need to be honest and transparent. We have made mistakes, but we've learned from them, hopefully. So I would say that our approach to investing, our approach to shortlisting, evaluating investing has changed quite a bit over the last 8-10 years. Right? Initially, we made mistakes. So I'll give you an example. One company where we made a mistake, it's an interesting company called Quaco, and we invested in it. I also invested in this. They are basically they are a little like Make My Trip, but not for conventional hotels, not these, Hyatt Regencies and Taj and so on. Boutique properties, right? Typical boutique resorts or, 10-room, 15-room, 20-room places. We invested in them because we believed this was a good opportunity. We realized 2 things. Number 1, over time, we realized the size of the market was not large enough, right? Because, if you remember our persistent model, the size of the market needs to be large, so they keep growing. So at some stage, they were not able to grow and they started stagnating. That is number 1. Number 2, they said, okay, because the size of this market is not large enough, let us try and look at conventional hotels, not just boutique hotels, right? Because that's a very large market. There, what happened? They had no entry barrier. They couldn't compete with guys like Make My Trip and Yatra and Co. because these are giants, right? In any case, you can't compete with giants. So these guys finally folded up. And I think I remember we guys had put in about 5 lakhs each, and we probably got out of that about whatever the bank balance was shared amongst us, some 20-25,000. So that was a big failure. But I would say it was a big learning experience, because now if you look at a persistent model, it has worked very well, right? Because now we wouldn't invest in this company. I'll give you
I'll
another
talk
example.
about on the other
Yeah,
side
yeah.
of a company which did badly and did very well. So there's a company which is called Shop Kirana, and they were operating from Indore. And the business model was to aggregate mom and pop shops and help them to leverage the economies of scale, which the modern retail and malls could do. So they started from Indore. They were reasonably successful. We invested in the company 1.5 crores. And with that money, they decided to come to Bombay. That was a total failure, because the Bombay market is very different. There are, modern retail as well as, the big ticket retail chains. Like they were all over the place. They were able to give better prices, and so on and so forth. So they were a complete failure, and they were almost bottom of the barrel as far as the money is concerned. But that taught the company that their model was probably more suited to tier 2, tier 3 cities. And that's what they did. They went to Jaipur, Baroda, Ahmedabad, and Bhopal, and places like that. And today I'm very happy to share that our investors got a 25x times return on that investment. After that, so companies will make mistakes, entrepreneurs need to correct, and that's what also we look at the team. Does that the team have the ability to admit their errors and pivot or modify them? Are they agile enough, and are they willing to listen to what the market is saying? And that is what differentiates the team. In the same business, two teams can get it, and the team which is better in one.
So that's what we
In
call
being
the
more
dream
agile.
founder, by the way, the dream founder. So, by the way, if we have time, I'll just share one other quick story. Incidentally, the shop Kirana, I had been to Indore when their startup policy was launched, and the Prime Minister Modi, he was there on video. So he had a 10-minute video chat with the founder of Shop Kirana, because that was such a startling success story, right? And that's what has happened. One quick example. Sushanto, you showed the Planet Spark, right? The Planet Spark is a very interesting case of, they tried to, this came up about 4 years back. They tried to create organized tuition centers with digital content. And they had taken rooms from Oyo rooms, very good rooms. They had a mentor. They had a lot of digital content for English and I think maths. And, kids would come there on the laptop. They would have workbooks. They would have animation and so on. And they'd be very happy. They'd learn. So this was meant for kids up to the age of, up to class 8. Then COVID happened. Obviously, nobody comes to centers. So they switched to online. Now, obviously, they did very badly, because online, they were trying to teach maths and English. And who were they competing with? Guys like Vedantu and Byju's and Topper, who are giants. You cannot compete with giants. It doesn't make sense, right? So they kept pivoting, kept trying various things. Finally, they zeroed in on public speaking for children, because they realized that, the parent would want his or her child to get good marks, admittedly, yes, but they also want their children to be able to speak confidently and face the world. Suddenly, this business boomed. And within, I think, 3 years from the time they raised their first round of funds from, initially they raised it from Indian Angel Network, and then we, in the next round, put in our money. From the initial round to the final round, the valuation has gone up by 75 times. Okay, 75x in 3 years. It's a phenomenal achievement, but they went through a very bad patch when they were trying to compete with Byju's. So again, we look at the founder, how persevering he is. Can he tap the opportunity which has been created by the adversity. They did.
Shall we?
Yeah.
One last question. I'm sorry. Can I ask one last question? I
Yes.
think I've already sent it to Gitansh. As it's lately now the ecosystem in India for startups is changing and evolving in the sense that now I think this price to sales and just the top line growth is a overrated thing. So are the unicorns. Uh, just the concept of making a company a unicorn does not necessarily mean that they're making profit, and we have seen quite a few cases globally as well as in India. So in that backdrop, has the process for LA also changed to look at companies which are actually making profit, cash profit at least if nothing else?
So I'll take it first before Dhruv takes over from me.
Yeah, I need half an hour to answer this question, by the way.
But I think that's
Then I'll have to have a separate chat with Dhruv on this.
Sure, boss.
that is the difference between a professor and finance executive. So,
Okay, yeah.
Rajat, I'll try to answer this question
Sure.
in a minute, and Dhruv will take it. And of course, what I will answer in one minute does not really answer the question, but I'll try. See, India is still a land of opportunity, right? So, if, for example, let's take the case of Uno Finance. Now, they will need to probably publicize the fact that this loan is available. People are not aware of the problem. But in essence, they have a reasonable spread between the commissions that they're getting from the hospital and the interest that they are paying their NBFCs. So as long as the business is sound, if in the initial years it does not make profit because the company has to promote itself or build a large team to be able to cater to that entire market, we're okay. But if the business itself is not sound, that on every sale the company is making a negative contribution or a loss, then we would usually ask this case. Maybe some of these companies will do well and will get valuation, but we think as angel network, we are not able to continuously fund those companies in the hope that somebody else will acquire them. So for example, if Zepto, which is a very successful company, which does, uh, delivery within 15 minutes in some of the Indian metros, if they had come to us, Rajat, we would have said no to them because we know that intrinsically the business is not making money and they will have to spend a lot of money giving discounts and so on and so forth. Maybe it's better for the bigger VCs and others to invest. Some of these companies will succeed, some of them won't, but we are not the best suited source for their investment. But over to Dhruv for a better answer than mine.
No, it's not a better answer, it's a longer answer.
Oh,
So Rajat, by the way, on exactly this topic, I had written a piece in the Economic Times about 3 weeks back, so I can send you that piece. In fact, Gitansh, maybe we can just share it with all the members because this is a very, very hot topic and it's a very valid question, right? Now, see, 20 years back or 25 years back, the world suddenly woke up to the fact that there is such a thing as the internet and it can be useful for business, correct? And at that time, the biggest measure that people used was eyeballs. Was get eyeballs somehow, and money will follow, revenues will follow, etc., etc. That crashed in the dot-com bust, early 2000s. That crashed obviously because people said it's not just enough to get visitors to your site; they have to actually pay you. So from there, it moved to revenues, right? Which is a very positive, very good step forward. The point is that also unfortunately got blown out of proportion. And I'll explain why. You know, if you look at conventional businesses, in a conventional business, the vendor or the business has to have a physical touch point, which is close to the customer, right? So if you're let's say a travel agent, you are sitting here and the guy is sitting next to you and you're discussing what is required and you're booking tickets for him. But when you move to the internet-based businesses, that touch point is not required anymore because anybody can be a business can be based anywhere and you can access the entire country or the entire world if required. So in the conventional space, you had lots and lots of small chotu travel agents existing, lots, probably lakhs of them in every town. But in the online space, now that the internet has come in, you only have a few giants, right? So you've got Make My Trip, you've got Yatra, you've got probably Ease My Trip, Clear Trip, and maybe one or two more, right? So maybe 5 or 6 of them. And the world realized that this was happening. The small guy will get choked, he'll get knocked out. The big guy will just kill them through whatever discounting, growth, brand image, etc., etc. So investors started investing for dominance. They said, we will put money into companies, internet-based companies, which are showing solid growth and are moving towards a position of dominance. Once they move towards the position of dominance, hopefully there'll be only 4 or 5 of them, and at that stage we can start looking at profitability. So, which is why investors kept pumping money into these companies which were going rapidly, and ultimately many of them became unicorns. But the problem there is revenues is what we were focusing on. Revenues is what determined valuations, but it was revenues at any cost. Too bad if you're making a loss, reach a position of dominance. What has happened in the last few years, fortunately, is that the world has realized, and not just investors, even companies have realized that, look, this cannot go on forever. It is not sustainable. And this has been helped by the fact that, Putin attacked Ukraine and the Fed decided to raise interest rates and the world is in recession and risk off and so on and so forth. And therefore, this mania for growth at any cost, dominance at any cost, is now ebbing. And today what people are looking for, like Sushanto rightly says, is show me a path to profitability. I don't want to see profits today, but show me a path to profitability. And in the context of our companies, the angel level, which is the very early stage companies, we don't expect them to be profitable, although some of them are. We don't expect it because, like Sushanto rightly said, particularly in the B2C kind of businesses, you have to spend a hell of a lot on marketing just to get yourselves known, just to reach the customer, right? So your customer acquisition cost is going to be high, and therefore you're not likely to be profitable. What we start focusing on is the unit economics. If you're selling one piece, for on that one piece are you making money? Forget the overheads like salaries and rental and so on and marketing costs. On that one piece are you making money? Essentially, I'm talking of gross margins. Is that positive? And is that moving more and more towards, if it is negative, is it at least moving towards positivity and therefore becoming positive? That's what we focus on. And in fact, valuations that we look at normally, the the basis that we use is gross margins, although there are many, many other factors which are involved. So just to summarize, yes, top line is not the answer. I mean, GMV is such an easy thing to do. Ultimately, it is a path to profitability. And one of the things which determines this path to profitability is gross margins either being positive or moving towards positivity. And that's what we look at.
Thank you so much for your answer. I think we'll quickly move to the next question from Mr.
Unless you organize dinner, that is fine.
Lunch,
I'm okay.
at least lunch.
All right. So, a quick question from Ms. Sushmita Malviya. To reach out to LA, what's the basic minimum that you will entertain? Say registered organization, working for how many years, etc. I think there's no minimum criteria per se. We're generally a friendly group of people. So you can reach out to us and maybe then, we can take the discussion forward.
We look for revenue generating companies because
largely we look for revenue generating.
Yeah, because 8-10 years back we invested in companies which had a bright idea, but many of them failed, and that is not fair to our investors. So therefore we now look at some level of proof, which is in the persistent model traction, right? So some level of revenues, and if you have that, sure.
Right. So next question by Mr. Sumit M. What are course correction measures for startups failed to raise follow-up rounds or didn't get acquired?
Sorry, could you just repeat it again?
What are course correction measures for startups that failed to raise follow-up rounds or didn't get acquired? What are the basic things that they could do?
Right. So I think it is never too late for companies to pivot into something else. So I'll give an example of one of our companies called Transporter City, which was in the hyper local delivery business. The entrepreneur happened to be an ex-student of mine, and it looked like a great business then because.
And in spite of that, you built a great business.
No, he didn't.
Okay.
So what he started was he used to help, companies like Flipkart and others to collect from their depots and warehouses and deliver to the end users. But somehow that business did not take off. And the founder tried to raise capital. He couldn't raise capital. He looked for M&A. That didn't happen. And funnily, during this time, while they were improving the app for their, partners, delivery partners, and their customers, they started testing their app. And over a period of time, they pivoted into a software testing company called Hypertest. And now, of course, lead angels investors are already invested in the company, and it has recently got commitments to raise money from the same set and newer investors at 4 times. So you probably need to rethink the business if you're not able to. So pivoting is very important. I talked about Shop Kirana also. So Google is not doing what it started doing. So most successful startups will pivot. Dhruv talked about Planet Spark. So I think I would encourage the founders to pivot if they're not able to get acquired or raise money, or not able to survive on their own. Then this is probably the solution for them. Gitansh, you're organizing lunch, or we'll take only 2 more questions after this?
It's a virtual lunch. Tandoori chicken on the menu.
No, lunch can be organized regardless of the time or questions. We can meet up after this. So I'll quickly. So we'll take up 2 more questions.
Yes, please.
Okay. So for the from Ms. Devjyoti Mohanty, for the 25 lakh rupees investment, is this open to any individual with rupees 25 lakhs? Or are there any specific compliances that need to be considered?
So when you join the network, and please correct me, the team has better understanding of this. We do a certain KYC which is required by SEBI to check about your proof of address, PAN card, etc. So there's a KYC that we do, and thereafter you're free to and you need to give a certain declarations to us. And after that, you can invest in any other company. Does that answer the question, Gitansh?
Yes, I believe so.
If not, please let us know and we will answer that.
You can just reach out to us. We'll put in our contact details in the chat box, and you can reach out to any of us. We're most happy to help.
You can do that.
I think we'll take 1 more question from Mr. Abhijit Pulia. One of the key points over and above the investment framework and processes, the quality of the funnel, as a lot of time and energy is wasted there. What is your thoughts on sourcing of good deals? What is a follow-on process post-investment? Early warning signals that we look out for, and how are investors updated on the development post the initial interest?
There are 5 questions in this. So I'll try to answer them one by one. So the first question is about what is the, we get a lot of companies, over 200 companies, how do we shortlist? So we have over a period of time figured that one of the best sources of deal flow is our other fellow angel. They would have evaluated a company. They've seen the company, they've probably invested in the company earlier, and they want to share this company with us, and they're willing to invest in the company again. So that gives us a lot of confidence in taking that up for our evaluation. Then there are our own members and contributors who bring transactions to the platform, as I talked about earlier in the community. That also gives a lot of confidence because our members would have done a certain level of diligence. So the source of the reference becomes very important. Is it another angel network? Is it one of our members? Is sometimes some venture funds also come and give reference to the companies which they like but are perhaps too early for them, and that also gives us the confidence that the venture fund will eventually invest in that company if it reaches certain things. So these are the three preferred sources of uh, investment. Last being our own portfolio companies who may connect us to their friends who they recommend. So the next question was that what is the post-investment follow-up, right? So once the investment is done, then the company reports on a quarterly basis to us, and we typically organize investor meetings along with the company so that not only do they share their updated information, but uh, also answer questions that investors may have. That is, of course, providing the information and taking suggestions from our investors. But what we believe is the key is that we have our advisory division, our portfolio support team, which is in the providing those inputs to the companies, saying that this is what you should do, this is the possible M&A opportunity, these are the VC, this is how the VC market is changing, this is where you may want to connect to VCs. Right now, we are talking about merger of two companies that we have invested into. So we're continuously looking at these opportunities not only within our portfolio, but again with our portfolio company and somebody else. And we think that M&A will be a critical way of providing value to our investors, which is done by our advisory team. And of course, we have gray hairs, mine as well as Dhruv's.
No, I used to have gray hair. Now I don't.
Help those companies when they want to connect to somebody, or because networking is what we can provide an early stage company, right? Because they don't have the credibility, and we are fortunate to have members who are CXOs, and they invariably help the company to make those connections. I think that we will take that as the last question. It doesn't mean that we will not answer your questions. Please, whatever questions have been asked, we will answer them. And if you have any more questions, Gitansh, if you can share the email ID where people can put in their questions, please, on the chat box.
Yes, I've just put in. So for all questions, you can reach out at info@leadangels.in. For any membership related queries, you can directly reach out to me at gitansh@leadangels.in. Also, we have a feedback form that I'll be putting in the chat box again. We request you to fill that up. So that will only help us, design our future interactions better. We go through all the forms and, take feedback and try to improve our workshop, workshop experience for all our attendees. Thank you, Ms. Malia, for filling the form. Request all of you, just spare 2 minutes and fill that up.
Yes. Which includes, if you want better looking people who presented, we'll try to do that as well.
Or maybe if you would like, virtual lunch, like Professor Joe suggested.
Thank you very much for all of you to take off time. I know it's lunchtime, and you've taken the Saturday afternoon off. So thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you for your questions also. We liked your questions. Some of them were very tough, especially Rajat. Your questions are always very tough. I wish I had asked them to you 25 years ago, but incidentally, Rajat and I used to work together 25 years ago. And
we're still working together, Sushanto.
Yeah.
Right. Aditya, can you end the recording, please?